My name is Ben Tice, owner and director of Skol Marketing. We help businesses get online and establish their online presence with web development and all that kind of fun stuff. And then we also help them enhance their online presence with things like SEO, SEM, and social media. But my favorite part of my job is partnering with great organizations like Score to be able to put on these different types of workshops to really kind of educate you guys on not only the different changes that are happening, but also the different types of strategies overall involved with these different types of topics. And so today we're going to be focusing on search engine optimization 2.0. So what we're going to be kind of talking about is going a little bit further into SEO and really understanding that if this is something you guys are doing internally, or again, having someone else do like as an employee or even an outside resource, being able to help you, that you kind of understand at least kind of what's going on and again, what's kind of being done and what we need to do to really kind of be successful for on Google and other search engines for search engine optimization and ultimately being found. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started with Enhance Your Online Presence Search Engine Optimization 2.0. So the first thing I just like to start out with the very, very basics to make sure that we're all on the same page here is just understanding search engine optimization. Is what we're also ultimately trying to do here is we are trying to understand how Google, Yahoo, Bing, all the search engines out there, DuckDuckGo, again, Ask, all of them that you can think of, how they want and how they read our site and our online presences to really understand and to really kind of connect with them so we can ultimately rank higher. When someone's searching for our products and services and don't know we exist, that's ultimately what SEO is. Now, a couple of things to kind of know, here is that Google holds about a 70+ market share. Honestly, if we even break that down to like local Midwest or local Minnesota here, we're talking honestly closer usually to 90% market share. Usually meaning that when someone's using a search engine, again, approximately 85 to 90%, again, around here is going to be Google. As you get outside, again, just the state and into the other country, it's still at a very hefty 70+ market share. The reason I mention that is you're going to see us talk about predominantly just Google today, but that doesn't mean that we're not optimized for Yahoo, for Bing, for DuckDuckGo, for Ask and the other search engines out there. It's just understanding that, really what's happened here is Google is the trailblazer and the other ones kind of follow suit and then kind of, update them and make them their own a little bit on their own search engines. Also, like honestly, even for a fun fact, if you use Yahoo search, you're actually using Bing's engine. They actually farm out Bing's engine now and don't even have their own, again, there. They've got a lot more towards news and sports and things like that. So you can see how, some of those changes kind of impact, but really all the pillars we're going to talk about here today, and even some more of the specific pillars and like that level 2 kind of optimization that we're kind of talking about is going to be applicable to all search engines out there. Google on average, and this goes for a lot of the other search engines as well, makes roughly 400 updates a year. So they're really kind of changing something, again, almost essentially every day to really kind of make their product and make their service that much better. Most updates only affect about 1 to 3% of searches, but obviously with as many people as that's searching, that can have a big impact. And one thing though that is, again, that is true here is that ROI has changed over time. Really what's kind of happened here, ROI meaning return on investment, is it's not so much that the value of SEO has gone down. If anything, it's, again, gone up. It's just the amount of effort and the amount of things that now are, again, equated into the algorithms that, Google, Yahoo, Bing take into consideration have increased. And so a lot of times what's, again, kind of happened is that we might have to put in a little bit more effort to either get the same or kind of, get to that next echelon than, again, previously 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. That's ultimately what a lot of times kind of changes is really at the end of the day, what all these search engines are trying to do is trying to have little elements within their algorithms to understand why you are the best, website or web presence for someone searching. Well, again, when I say that, there's a lot of qualitative data to that because it can be very subjective. It's not cut and dry. It's not black and white. When we add those different types of elements that aren't just black and white, there's a lot of times a lot more work that needs to be done, or a lot more opportunities to either succeed or potentially even fail as well. So that's one of the biggest changes that you're going to see. Again, if you're just getting into SEO, if you're trying to enhance SEO and maybe you haven't paid attention to it for a few years, really it's the quality and the amount of content. Those things have drastically increased, and that's one of the huge things that we're seeing here. But to kind of take a step back and just understand what we're kind of talking about here is, we're still talking about the same three types of SEO. We have back-end optimization. That's, again, going to be all our HTML, our coding, our settings. This is the one that a lot of times usually either people hate or associate with SEO because it's usually something that they don't know about or is a little bit more kind of, nerve-wracking or outside their skill set. We also have front-end optimization, everything you can touch, feel, kind of see on a site from a user's perspective. Very, very important. And then last but not least is offsite optimization. So everything that's not your website, but is pointing to it. So this is, you can see social media accounts, local listings, YouTube, your Better Business Bureau profile, all of those little different things that essentially are talking about you, are kind of a presence or a platform and are linking to you, but obviously not your actual website. That is going to be offsite optimization. And here's the other thing. So we've got three different types of SEO, and they're done in two different phases. The first is called foundational SEO. This is honestly one of the first mistakes we see a lot of people make when they get into SEO, even people that know SEO and things like that. A lot of times what we're talking about here is you need to make sure that sometimes you either step back, or if you're just building a website, if your website's new, if your business is new, you need to make sure that you establish the foundation. So we're either stepping back and fixing the foundation or establishing the foundation. And foundational SEO is essentially we're laying the foundation to our relationship with Google so that they firmly know what, where, and who. What we do, where we do it, and who we do it for. This essentially gets us on Google's radar so that then we can move into relational ongoing SEO. This is ultimately what a lot of times people equate to SEO, and rightfully so, because this is that building that long-term business relationship with Google over time. That's what we're doing here with relational and ongoing SEO. And this gets into that kind of that qualitative why. Why should Google rank you above other competitors or other websites out there or whatnot when someone's searching for products and services that you guys would align with? That's ultimately what we're getting here. And as we know, with a business relationship, doesn't happen overnight, doesn't happen by making one phone call or sending one referral. It happens because of a multitude of touch points, a variety of touch points, and time to kind of nurture that. That's why ultimately, again, we describe SEO being a long-term business relationship with Google. But it's really important, and we'll kind of break these down a little bit as we kind of go into it. But again, like this is super important to make sure that we've got our foundational SEO set and that we're again shifting over to relational or ongoing. Today, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on relational ongoing because our SEO 1.0 really kind of more or less talked about foundational as well. And just to give you kind of a quick recap, is foundational SEO is, for instance, making sure we have all of our service pages so that are clearly laid out, all of our location pages, if you, again, have different locations that you do, making sure we have all of our everything's kind of connected to Google. If it's our sitemaps, making sure our social media is set up correctly, all of that kind of stuff goes into foundational. Then we shift into, okay, we've got this foundation. Now, how do we start building on top of it and making sure that we've got that? So we'll go into, we'll touch on foundational here, as well as we'll go into a little bit more relational, but we'll kind of see what the difference is there and what you can ultimately do with your web presence. So when we look at back-end SEO, this is where it gets really kind of technical. These are a lot of the technical type of things that you can start to kind of do and start to implement, or if you're having somebody else implement them, to at least kind of know what's kind of going on. The first thing for sure is to start with keyword research. We talk about this in 1.0 a little bit, again, extensively. What we're talking about here is I see a lot of business owners, even a lot of SEO professionals that will just write out different keywords or ask the client to say, hey, what do you want to rank for? And that's a great place to start. But if you stop there, that's a huge mistake, because we also need to realize that, at the end of the day, Google search is set up to really, again, search for something, but people search for things differently. I always like to kind of just say, you can do this exercise in your mind. If you can see my, again, my camera here, I'm holding up just a remote control. But if I were just to hold this remote control up to the screen and said, hey guys, search for this. That's ultimately what we're trying to communicate kind of with Google, because if we have 20 people in this, on this call, we might have 18 different ways that are being searched for that, but we're all searching for the same thing. That's ultimately what we're kind of, again, here is it's not black and white. And that's ultimately what keyword research can really kind of help you with, is you might be looking at it from one, again, perspective, but really, again, SEO is almost a prism. There are many other aspects and different ways to kind of look at it. Reason I'm saying this, and again, some of you guys have probably already done keyword research, you guys already do it. It's just reinforcing to make sure you take the time to kind of do it. Because again, if you go into SEO and you just implement it, even your team implementing it, I can almost guarantee you that you're going to miss another perspective out there. And that's a really key kind of component to that. So using tools like Moz or SEMrush and things like that are fantastic, because they're going to allow you to see your site or your web presence from a different kind of angle, from a different perspective, to make sure that we can get as much exposure as possible. Now, when we start looking to implement things on the back end, now some of this stuff is going to be foundational, but also this is going to be ongoing as we start to add more content, as you start to add more blogs, some more white papers, some more service pages, whatever it may be as you go along, we're going to want to do these. But you also want to make sure these are done on a foundational level and every page was touched. The first one is just looking at metadata. So technically there are meta tags, meta titles, meta descriptions. Meta tags are really no longer used today. I just, again, we just reference those just in case you hear of those, because sometimes you'll still see them referenced if you have kind of those DIY builders like your Weebly, Wix, GoDaddy builders. You can still sometimes see the word for meta tags or keyword tags. They're just not utilized anymore. Really what we're talking about is meta titles and meta descriptions. Meta titles are going to be those blue hyperlinks that whenever you search for something on Google, you see the title right there with the underline in blue. And the meta description is going to be the black kind of text below it. Now, here's kind of some key things to kind of look at when we're looking at meta titles and meta descriptions. Meta titles, on average, you should try to, again, maximize the length of your meta title as much as possible. What we're talking about here is once we have our keyword research, we essentially need to take every opportunity to, again, reinforce to Google all of the things, again, what we do, where we do it, and who we do it for. Really what we do is we come up with a plan like that with keyword research, and then it's just using all of these opportunities to keep repeating ourselves and implementing that. So one of the ways is meta titles. That's going to be kind of the title on every page. And approximately, you get approximately 75 characters. And so 75 characters is every letter, every punctuation, every space. So you want to try to utilize that as much as possible. And so, again, trying, if your name has, again, some keywords in it, that's great. If not, then trying to put some keywords kind of in there. You can see, for instance, an example right here, roof to deck decoration, Christmas lighting, Minneapolis. We're not only describing it to the user, that's also great keyword information because we kind of essentially know what they do and where they're kind of doing it right there. So we get those 75 characters. Every page, you're going to want to make sure that this happens for. Every new page that you upload to the site, you want to make sure that this happens for. Now, what's kind of nice is most CMS systems today, like your WordPress or things like that, are going to, like, for instance, if you upload a blog post, it's going to take the title of your blog and put it right in there. That might be that honestly might be a great meta title. You just want to double check or just even quickly just think to yourself if there's there. Or for instance, maybe if it's a shorter title, you might be able to put, something like a location or a keyword that obviously kind of flows, or even potentially your name too, depending on how your site is set up and what your name is and if it has keywords in it, to that title as well. Then we get into meta descriptions. Now, this is essentially taking the title and just explaining it longer. So instead of having 75 characters, we have approximately 155 plus characters. And so now we just get to explain that more. So now you can pretty much reiterate the title, but every page, we want to be able to actually take some time and describe these. If we can put some keywords or some locations in there that still sound natural. Now, what you don't want to do is just keyword, comma, keyword, comma, keyword, comma. You actually, but if you can flow them into there, kind of like you can see here, we've got Christmas lighting again. We've got Minneapolis, again, Minnesota and nearby areas, roof to deck decoration. Their name already has some of that into there. So you can, again, kind of see how we can start to kind of flow that out. So I like to kind of tell people is when we're talking about meta titles and descriptions, they're part marketing and they're part SEO technical. And what the reason that I'm saying that's a little different is part marketing is that we still need them to be visually pleasing, and we can't just do keyword, comma, keyword, comma. You still want to make sure you have correct punctuation, capitalization, things like that. So from a marketing standpoint, it looks appealing. But then also we want to try to be a little bit kind of direct when it comes to kind of the technical SEO aspect as well. Another big one, and this goes a lot of times for, really all the content, mainly your service pages and your blog pages. This is talking about header tags. This is essentially, you can see kind of an example here to the far right, how this can essentially kind of be, structured out correctly. So a lot of times the H1 is the title and the big idea of your post. That could be your blog post, that could be your service page, could be whatnot. Then as we get into it, this is kind of reads like kind of like a textbook back in high school or college. We start with the chapter of our book, then we kind of get into either the sub chapters or the different points within that chapter. So for instance, again, we could, maybe it's starting with a service. If we are a lawn care service and, again, we're going to talk specifically about lawn mowing, again, so H1 might be the title of our lawn mowing page. Well, then H2 and again, the different H2s, as you can see with first point and second point over here, may go a little bit further into that. So maybe you have residential lawn mowing, maybe you have commercial lawn mowing, maybe you have yard cleanup, and those are all part of the lawn mowing kind of service. So you can see that you're always only going to have one H1, and all the other ones are then can be unlimited, as you can kind of see here. So H2, H3, H4. It gets pretty hard to go beyond H4, but you can technically go to H6. And again, I'm not trying to confuse you here with all the different H1, H2, H3, but really if you look at this, again, this graph right here, all it's talking about doing though, is just making it visually more pleasing to, again, to your users, because it's going to have different sizes of fonts and stuff like that, but also to Google essentially reads this on almost like a sitemap or a skeleton of it. What they're going to do is they're going to scan your page, and they can quickly pick up, just like if you were to open up a textbook right now and quickly flow through it, you would see, okay, this is what this chapter is about. And then you see these H2, the first point, then you see the other H2, the second point, and then they kind of go further into it. So again, it just makes it not only more visually appealing to read, it also makes it easier for Google to understand what that content is about and to start to kind of prioritize it. That's ultimately where header tags are, and that's why it's kind of important. Again, you may do one and maybe you only have an H1, maybe you only have an H1 and an H2. You don't need all of them. It's just they're there. So as you get more and more content, if it's applicable, you can actually structure it correctly. Also, alt tags for images. So every image on your website, there is a spot, and this, again, this is for Weebly and Squarespace and Wix builders, all the way up to, custom builds or, your WordPress builds. But every image should essentially have a description to it. Really, again, the opportunity for you, again, taking our keyword research and our plan that we have and using every opportunity to implement this as much as possible. We did that with meta titles. We did that with descriptions. We're even structuring our content with header tags. Well, now what we're able to do is we're able to describe the images that are on our website, and most likely, again, because you're choosing those images, they're going to probably have some relevance to your, your business, your consumers, or your services or products. Well, that's kind of great because most likely the words that you're going to use to describe them are most likely going to be related or positive or impactful kind of keywords. Now, again, you want to try to kind of fit some of them in there. Like I'll give you an example. If we're doing a snow removal service, you can be a little creative here. And if we've got someone, if we've got a plow truck plowing somebody's driveway, we might say, again, plow truck removing residential snow in St. Paul. Instead of just saying, truck removing snow, we could actually almost take it like a meta title and just describe it a little bit further, add a location in there, add something that's a little bit more descriptive. So that's kind of what we're talking about. And it does take some time, but if you've already had a website, to go through and do all your images. But as you start to potentially add new images, as you start to build out your portfolio pages, if you have gallery pages, if you have blogs that have images on them, you just want to make sure all of these things need to be done first, usually with foundational SEO. But then every time that you add content there on out, you want to make sure that gets done as well. Want to make sure that we have a sitemap. This is also referenced in, again, SEO 1.0, but it's just so important. We want to make sure that gets there. Really, you want to take your sitemap and you want to make sure that you connect it to Google Search Console. That's going to be very critical. You want to make sure that, and not only just, upload your sitemap, but spend some time on Google Search Console and make sure things are up to par. What I mean by that is you can actually go to Google Search Console once you've submitted your sitemap, and you can see if maybe for some reason Google's not indexing certain pages. I'll be honest, right now, we've seen a lot of one big kind of change that's been happening is Google seems to be a little bit more strict on the type of pages that they're indexing. We're seeing this actually impact a lot of e-commerce companies where we're actually submitting all of their pages, all of their products, and Google's saying, hey, we recognize those, but we're not going to index them. And now there's a variety of reasons. Sometimes there's errors, sometimes there's missing information. Sometimes Google's just saying, hey, the quality's not there. We need you to add more descriptions, more images, or things like that. My point being, though, is, for sure, utilizing that sitemap on Google Search Console to make sure that, all this hard work that you're putting into building a website, creating content, not only is submitted to Google, but is accepted by Google. And that's a key thing there. Now, again, what's really kind of nice is they'll give you some kind of guidance. It's not always exactly, hey, this is 100% what's wrong, fix it here, but you do get some answers that you can start to kind of explore or, further investigate. You also want to make sure that you are keeping all of your CMS, like your content management systems like WordPress, up to date and updating all the plugins. Another big thing is backlinks. Backlinks have been around since the start of SEO. They have been kind of sometimes, very, very important on SEO and also the bane of Google's existence as well. And so really a backlink, just so you guys know, and we're on the same page here, is any website that is not your own that's essentially pointing to your site. So hypothetically, you are a pizza place located in St. Paul, Minnesota, and the Star Tribune writes an article about the top 10 pizza places in the Twin Cities and links to your, again, kind of website after doing, a couple sentence write-up on it. That would be a backlink. So anything that, again, is a website that's linking back to you. The reason that these are so powerful is that Google is essentially saying, okay, wow, this website right here is essentially linking off of their website and diverting people, again, off of their website and their traffic to this other website. That's why it's so powerful. Where it can get you in trouble, though, is when, again, and this doesn't happen very often, but you used to just be able to buy as many backlinks as you could, and people would create backlink farms and stuff like that. Really, again, like I said, you don't really see that much anymore and stuff like that. But what you do want to take into consideration is backlinks are important, and you can control some of them. Social media accounts, local listings, if you're part of networking events, any opportunity that you have that you can put your kind of profile or you can create something that can backlink back to your website, that's a positive. Also, creating content on an ongoing basis can also be a great fit. Again, if you're creating, consistent blogs, if you're creating consistent white papers, that gives you the opportunity to have someone, again, do a backlink to you from social, from their own blog, from, again, wherever they may be at. Also, another really good backlink is that if you have a YouTube channel, make sure in the description of all your videos that you have a link back to your website as well. So again, some of these you can control, and the other ones you can influence by having multiple kind of pieces of content as well. SSL, that's going to just be the security of your site. You just want to make sure that you have that, again, very well. We'll talk a little bit about that here as we go along. Same thing with speed. We want to make sure that the speed of our website is top notch, not only for a user experience, but also Google tags onto that. And, again, that can also affect some of our rankings as well. And last but not least, this is kind of my PSA announcement. I just like to kind of get this term out there. This doesn't apply to everybody, but if you're ever rebuilding your site, or if you ever change like the structure of your menu, like, so for instance, maybe you take a service that was underneath services and you put it on the top of your menu, maybe you move things around, a lot of times that actually changes the actual URL that it was at. So maybe it's no longer skolmarketing.com/services/SEO. Maybe it's now just skolmarketing.com/SEO. The reason I bring this up, this happens a lot of times when you rebuild websites, you move things around, you change things. You need to make sure that anytime you change a URL, that you do what's called a 301 redirect. What's kind of nice is all of the, Weebly, Wix, Squarespace, the DIY builders, they have this functionality already built in. And if you have a WordPress kind of site, you can just do a plugin. But the reason that this is important is a lot of times people mistakenly change, again, one of the URLs, and to Google then, that URL no longer exists. And that URL is now throwing a 404 error, which is not a good thing to have. Like, Google doesn't want to see your website have multiple errors. Google doesn't want to send people to a site that has no information or a page that just has 404 error. So essentially what a 301 redirect does is you communicate to Google and say, hey, this page used to be at skolmarketing.com/services/SEO, but I'm now moving it to skolmarketing.com/SEO. What that does is it not only communicates and it actually, visually forwards the person to the new URL, it also then takes all of that clout and equity that was built on that URL and transferred over from like an SEO standpoint to the new one. That's why it's so important when you build websites to make sure that you do almost like a 301 or a URL audit, for that. Or if you decide to delete pages, like just had this with a client that said, hey, Ben, we're actually changing our services. We're getting rid of these 2 services. Can you remove them from the site? Absolutely. But we don't just go in there and delete those pages. We have to remove them and then communicate that change to kind of Google. So again, just be aware of 301 redirects. Like I said, it's not only is it super beneficial, but it may not apply to everybody. But it's just one of those big PSA announcements, because I have seen too many times where people rebuild a site, they change their domain, they didn't know what was going on, and they just saw their ranking and their relationship crater with Google, because you essentially are making all of these connections to Google. And if you break them, it's like taking a sword to them and you're cutting them, again, you're severing those connections. Obviously not what we want. We essentially want to unplug them and plug them into the new one, from that perspective. So 301 redirects, super important if you're rebuilding a site, but also super important as you start to potentially change or modify and even add content onto the site if it's changing any of your current URLs. Front end optimization. So we talked about kind of keyword research. That is super applicable, again, here as well, as not only are we going to use that keyword research on the back end to, of course, implement into meta titles and descriptions and alt tags and all of those kind of fun places, but then we're also going to use this keyword research to help us kind of create or potentially even flesh out content that's on the current site. So looking at our service pages, our location pages, those are usually the big ones that we kind of see, or also product pages, I should add too. And so what we're talking about here is, on average, when you have a service page, you should try to look to have at least 500 kind of words per page. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be, indexed. If you get less than that, doesn't mean that, again, like you're not going to rank or whatever if you don't hit that number. It's just that's usually a healthy number for you to kind of convey, again, what that service is, who it's for, and where it's kind of being performed. Now, you might be asking yourself and going, well, Ben, I really love clean looking websites that are very modern and don't have a bunch of, text on them, because again, who actually is going to sit and read that? And you do have a kind of a fair point there. But we also need to remember that we've kind of got a balancing act here. We're not only building our website, of course, for the actual user, but we're also building the website to communicate the, again, the value that we provide to Google as well. So some of the content, for instance, maybe won't be just all for your users. It might be some of it for Google. Now, how we can potentially kind of, still make that work for you, so you don't just have 3 paragraphs of text there. This is where, again, website design comes into play, and we can break that kind of content up. We can use images, even use header tags can be very helpful in breaking up some of that content, contact forms or call to actions. This is where, again, either, using your internal skills of website design or, again, either internal or externally getting help for that can really kind of help, because we can take, that content that's still needed or is still recommended for both a marketing and a user's perspective, but also from a Google's perspective, and still flow within your brand and not to kind of take away from that user experience from a visual perspective. Also blogs, you've heard me reference those several times. This is a huge, this has been a staple for SEO for over a decade and continues to really kind of be, is what we're kind of talking about here is ongoing blogs. Not only does it help with marketing, because a lot of times you can repurpose those into, for instance, newsletters, you can repurpose them into social media posts, you can do a lot of that kind of stuff. But what we're also doing is we're continuing to show Google that we're continuously putting out content that's, again, that's related to our industry, our services, our audiences, but also the different types of services and all of those keywords are also a lot of times going to be infused. So, it works on multiple fronts there. A couple of things there, like the one I'd like to kind of point out is links. It's really good at the bottom of your blogs to kind of link to other pages on your website. It's kind of a little bit of a trick, so to speak. So like, for instance, if you, let's use Skol Marketing as another example. If I'm writing a blog post about a new Facebook feature that's coming out, again, of course, I'm going to lay that out. I'm going to have header tags. I'm going to have, again, about 500 words. I'm going to write that blog. But throughout there, I might be able to reference, again, social media or our services, or at the end, even contact us. The idea is if you have any other relevant content that's on your current site, using blogs to kind of link to them can really strengthen your content even on your site and in actually within Google's eyes. It's kind of, again, that backlink that we kind of talked about, you can kind of control that. Now, again, you have to be a little careful there. You shouldn't go on there and have 7 different, again, links on your blog, but a couple links can be really kind of beneficial if, for instance, we're saying, hey, contact us if you want to learn more. Hey, learn more about social media and our services on this page. Flowing a couple of those into there can be really kind of helpful for that. And this, again, the next bullet point can also be obviously subjective. We want to keep producing sufficient amount of content. And so, of course, the idea would be, well, Ben, what is a sufficient amount of content? Well, so part of it is that, the more content you can create, usually the better. But obviously, we've also got the variety of content pieces. We've also got the quality of content pieces. So a lot of times, just some, again, kind of goals that we even set for ourselves within Skol and a lot of our clients is, 1 to 2 blog posts per month. We try to do 1 video, again, per month. We also try to get about 5 reviews per month. And we do approximately 15 plus social media posts a month. So, again, the idea you can see there is we're having not only a sufficient amount of content, meaning, again, quantitative, but we're also having a little bit more qualitative kind of, content being created because there's different types there. There is just written pieces. There is a visual piece. There's more of a social piece. There is a review piece that, we call that user generated content. That's another kind of, again, key piece there as well. So the idea though, is just to at least take some of those kind of goals, kind of come up with your own goals too. Maybe it's, starting out being like, okay, Ben, I'm just getting started here. I want to commit to 1 blog post per month. And I want to commit to, again, maybe 7 social media posts and 1 review per month. Well, again, set those goals for yourself and then look how we can kind of accomplish those. You, of course, can accomplish them internally. You can get, again, help externally. That's like obviously what we do with clients. But you can see, though, there's a lot of things you can do internally there if you have the bandwidth and the skill set to kind of be able to execute that. And one of the other things, too, from a front-end optimization is the media to text ratio. I also kind of reference this, and this also brings back images and brings back header tags. Again, what we're talking about here, and this really flows into kind of more modern website design, is that nobody likes to go onto a website and just see blocks and blocks of black text on a white background with a nice contact form to the right. Again, we want to make it visually appealing. So making sure that we put images in there, making sure that we put potentially even media, that's what we say that could be videos embedding. Believe it or not, Google actually looks at this and actually, again, calculates, that's a small piece, but it's one of the factors that Google actually looks at to try to see, again, like how they can, again, at the end of the day, what Google's trying to do is, does your website give this user that's searching for X, Y, and Z the best opportunity to find their result? And this is just another component that Google is essentially utilizing. So, again, this one isn't really a hard one, but sometimes it does surprise people that Google's actually paying attention to that, not just from a marketing or from a visual appealing standpoint as well. So SSLs, we kind of talked a little bit about them. I'm going to kind of briefly kind of go over them because these are becoming more and more just standard, but we do, again, see this a lot. And so it's just making sure that your website needs to have the padlock with the HTTPS. That's really what we're kind of talking about here. It used to be pretty much just required for e-commerce, protecting people's credit card information. Now it's to even help people just protect all their information when they're sending you a contact form and they've got their email or their phone number. It's meant to even help protect that. Now, the big thing that I want to, again, leave you with though, is that if you do not have an SSL, just go to your hosting, wherever you host. If that's even your DIY builder, if you're hosting at, again, GoDaddy or Bluehost or HostGator, wherever it may be, go to them and they'll be able to give you some SSL options. What's kind of nice is there are, again, a bunch of free options that are just as good. And if you really want extra security, or if you have an extra kind of, e-commerce heavy site, you can also do some paid ones. But really, at the end of the day, just make sure you have the padlock and the HTTPS, because it can negatively impact your SEO in relationship with Google if we do not have that. Another thing that we've also talked a couple times about is, website speed. So everyone loves a fast site. Everyone hates a slow site. Again, that's nothing new here. But you might be surprised to know that the average mobile site takes on average 15 seconds to completely load. That doesn't mean that you're not going to see something for 15 seconds. It might just take 15 seconds to completely load. But that does get after the bigger problem that, of course, our attention spans and things like that, that a lot of times 53% of users will leave a web page if they can't see something visual within 3 seconds, or the main kind of pieces to it. So we need to make sure that we're having our site as fast as possible. Now, site speed can, again, there's a lot of things that can, again, kind of mess with this and kind of influence this. But really where I tell people to kind of start is there's a company called Pingdom, and you can just kind of Google it, and you can run kind of a test there. They'll run a free, speed test on your site, and you can be able to kind of see, again, what's happening and how fast or how slow your website is, and they'll give you some kind of recommendations. Google also, has their own speed test as well. And I usually recommend try 2-3 different of them out there. You can even Google for some, and there's some being created over the past couple of years that are new to the marketplace. The idea is though, just do some testing like that, just to see kind of where your site kind of, lays. But some things that you can do to kind of speed up your site, and you can follow these reports and things like that, is one is compressing images. One of the biggest things that people have is if you've got images over 1 megabyte on your site, you really got to look to kind of compress those. And what's kind of nice is if you have WordPress, there are plugins that you can install that can actually help you compress them. There are offsite places you can do that. When you're saving images, look at the file sizes and just be realistic here. Sometimes there's mode. Is this for print? Is this for web? Obviously, the web is going to be way smaller than your print. Also, you want to make sure that you enable browser caching. This is going to be mainly for like WordPress sites. So you want to make sure that you install a caching plugin. What that does is pretty much kind of saves copies of a lot of the things on your website and kind of sends them up to your browsers, so to speak, so that they don't have to keep fully reloading your page every time. So this can also help kind of the speed. Enable compression. This is something that might be a little bit more technical, but you can also get some help from your hosting ground and see where they're kind of at as well with there. But there's also plugins for compression too. Another really big one that we're seeing right now is kind of choosing the correct hosting environment. One biggest thing that I try to tell people is do not go cheap on hosting. Hosting, again, you can spend a lot of money on if you want, but again, an average cost is probably anywhere from $25 to $30 per month. Can you get cheaper than that? Absolutely. You can get sometimes $5, $7 hosting, but what you end up doing to yourself, though, a lot of times is you can have more vulnerability from a security standpoint. Definitely speeds kind of slow down. Kind of compare what a lot of hosting companies are doing now are very similar to what phone companies do. Is you've got kind of your max kind of resources there, for your 5G, and you have how many gigabytes to go on the internet, and then once you go after that, then you can kind of be metered and kind of slowed down. The same thing can kind of happen to hosting as well. So you want to make sure that you are, again, paying attention to that. You're asking the right questions, and you're also spending enough on that. I know $7 to $25 or $30 isn't that much, but I know sometimes that can sway people's decisions, and you can kind of be cutting off your nose to spite your face, with that. And ultimately, again, like Pingdom and some of these other companies, they actually have a lot of these plugins. There are actually speed plugins out there, and a lot of them are freemium models, which means that you can use them to up to a free kind of standpoint. Pretty much all of these are out there that have compression image plugins, browser caching plugins, compression, all of those kind of things. You can get plugins, and a lot of them are free, or, again, if you want to go further, you can kind of pay for that. But these are just some tips to kind of help speed up your website, because this obviously can impact user experience, which means it can definitely impact your SEO as well. Another really big change that we've really kind of seen here over the past about year and a half now is that Google has switched to what's called a mobile first indexing. So before this, really what Google did is they read your desktop version of your site first. They applied all of the speed, all of the user experience, the text to media ratio, all that fun stuff that we just kind of talked about what they were doing. They looked at your desktop first, then they looked at your mobile. Well, because of course, mobile is the majority of traffic on, again, on the internet, is that, again, this is something that is, now mobile first indexing. So what that means is that Google's now looking at our actual mobile site first. So what does that mean kind of to you? This means that you might have to, even though we build off of and we edit websites a lot of times on our desktop or predominantly, we might have to modify those things and really pay attention more to the mobile experience. And this is sometimes just kind of a trick for people, because like I said, we build all our websites on a desktop, and you probably are viewing your website majority of the time as a business owner or employee or manager of that from a desktop rather than a mobile device. But we need to be making sure that we're paying attention to mobile, probably even more so than desktop. So it's making sure that the most important content is prioritized kind of to the left and to the top. We need to make sure that, we know how mobile kind of works. Is they're going to split into columns and stack them on top of each other. Another really big thing, especially for mobile, especially when we start talking about like those service pages that should have 500 words, is, using expandable features or buttons that say read more, or again, I click this and then it kind of expands and I can see more content. Yes, people are, used to scrolling, but what people don't want to do is scroll through 7 paragraphs of text on a mobile device. So we can use some of those features, again, just like simply hiding content, saying read more, taking them other there, to kind of split that up to still get a good user experience, but still have that content on the site that Google can essentially, read. Kind of talked about this with speed, but make sure we don't have too many animations or large images that are either slowing down or again, just won't work that well on a mobile device. There doesn't mean you can't have animations, doesn't mean that you shouldn't have motion, doesn't mean you shouldn't have, images, quite the opposite. We just have to be cognizant of, again, how that's going to be displayed on a mobile device. And then the other thing too is make sure you're testing your site on mobile devices. Again, have different people, really test on an Android, test on an iPhone. Like, you'd be really surprised. And I know it sometimes sucks and it's unfortunate, but sometimes you can have issues that just happen on a certain browser, on a certain device. So make sure that we're testing that and taking that time and not just doing that kind of on a desktop. We need to take some time and look at the user experience, look at the speed, look at the functionality of our mobile sites, because again, Google is now looking at your site from the prism of a mobile perspective first, and then a desktop second. And then to kind of start to wrap this up is OffSite optimization. I kind of alluded to this as we've gone along as well, but this is where, like, for instance, social media. So setting a goal and actually realizing that if we're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest, it can have a positive impact on our SEO. The top ones would be Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest, but still LinkedIn and Instagram can still help with some of those other kind of things as well out there. And so, again, creating content on these, as we kind of talked about, is another opportunity to have a different type of content out there. Local listings, those are really, critical, because not only can we control that, we can say, hey, we've got another local listing with our business, URL and our name on it that's pointing back to us. So we're creating a backlink. But we're also, a lot of times, local listings, we can get reviews. So, monitoring those and trying to increase those on Yelp, on, again, Google Maps, on Facebook, on, again, Angie, whatever you might be on, those can have a positive kind of impact. Again, anything that we can essentially create or add to that is not our website, but another kind of component out there online, that's going to realistically be offsite optimization. And another one that you could even include on here too, it's kind of social media, kind of offsite optimization, is YouTube. YouTube is, again, the second largest search engine in the world, and YouTube is owned by Google. So, not only does it make sense because it's a platform that everyone knows and uses, it's also owned by Google. So when it comes to SEO, it is super, super valuable. We have a whole workshop that's just on this. So I encourage you guys to check that out if you guys want to learn more about how to optimize your videos and how it works. But really, at the end of the day, it is not only a marketing opportunity because, again, people love videos, and in the consumption of videos, the need and demand of videos is increasing, and the opportunity, again, potential there, or competitive opportunity is there, but also from an SEO perspective, absolutely, you can definitely take this to the next game. And we kind of talk about this in our, again, our video, workshop, but I've been kind of talking about this a little bit at times too, is, reusing the content that you're creating to kind of, again, we talked about reusing those keywords in as many places as possible to communicate with Google and to build our relationship. Well, the same thing can be there for your content. If we create a blog post, well, shoot, let's take that, again, that effort that we did in that blog, let's make it into 3-4 different social media posts that we can do. Let's make it into a video. Maybe let's make it into an infographic. That's ultimately where you can really, again, see yourself grow, because I know looking at this going like, Ben, like that's a lot of content. I've got a business to run. I've got a job to do. I, again, can't fully do that content. Now, again, you can get external help, but, again, if we're going to do some of that internally, you can really help yourself by being more efficient and having a better ROI on that by trying to repurpose and reuse those content. And that's a great place to kind of start here with YouTube. If you don't know how to, again, what video to create or whatever, I always tell people, go to your blog posts and pick one of your favorite blogs and let's create a video about it. If that's creating like a Zoom panel like this and you're talking to the camera doing it, if that's creating a, iMovie or a slideshow video, an animation video, any of those types of things can be a great place to kind of start. But absolutely, if you want to take SEO seriously now, it's not even just an added benefit, but if you want to take SEO seriously, you've got to, again, layer in video for it. So really looking at a recap is what we're talking about here is, again, we have two different phases of SEO. We have foundational and then ongoing relational, really creating that ongoing business relationship with Google. And then we're looking at the three different types of SEO. We have back-end optimization, front-end optimization, and offsite optimization. All three very important. Really, at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're doing keyword research. We're essentially taking what we do, who we do it for, and where we do it, and we're implementing that across our online presence, predominantly our website, but also offsite optimization, to really just keep reiterating this to Google. Take every opportunity that you can to build that relationship with Google. Take every opportunity that you can to keep reiterating and to keep, connecting with Google. That ultimately is what SEO is, and that's ultimately what we're seeing with that big change. Is it's just taking more content and more touch points to kind of do it. But that, that also can be a competitive advantage if we're willing to do that and either have the resources of time, energy, or budget to be able to kind of, again, allocate towards that. So with that said, I'd love to open it up to questions. If you guys have any, feel free to chat, or you can also, unmute. Kat, did you have a question?
I do, thanks. I'm thinking in terms of what you said for the mobile optimization, using that read more link that you're talking about, which is a great idea. I'm wondering though, will Google see the read more as contributing to the 500 words per page that you're trying to keep on your desktop site, right?
Great question. So it depends. So the answer is it depends on how you implement it, Kat. So really what we're talking about here is if you implement it with like one of like the, again, like expandable features, like where I click like, a lot of times you can see read more and it just expands like right on your page. If you do it that way, yes. If you have a button that says read more and it takes them to a separate page with a separate URL, then no. So it depends on how you, again, implement that. But yes, you can do that. And that's actually, it's kind of funny. One of the things Google actually had to do is Google actually used to hate those expandable features. They used to say, don't do that because Google had to take an extra step to kind of get in there and read that. But they had to realize themselves, though, that it's a better user experience for mobile. So they took away that negative connotation towards that in the algorithm and now even promote it because they feel like it's a better solution for all.
Cool. Can I ask you another question?
Absolutely.
I don't even know I know they changed it. So Google My Business, I think it's called something else again. They quit changing their names and their logos.
I know. Yep.
Whatever, the Google My Business. But we've had the darndest time trying to get them to change they've got a totally wrong location for us, for our Colorado area. And it's like trying to figure out how to get a hold of them to tell them to change that. It's just, geez, trying to find how to do that.
Yeah, no. So again, Google My Business is actually called Google Business Profile now. Again, I agree with you. I go back 10 years ago. It used to be called Google Places, then Google Plus Places. It's been everything. Google Local, yeah. So I agree with you there. But yeah, when it comes to this is absolutely, Google My Business, Google Business Profile, they are super important, and especially for local businesses, again, like you need them. It's pretty much a necessity for SEO, from a local perspective. If you are having trouble with some of the address, I'll say there's two different things to look at. So one is, again, what the error is and just kind of trying to follow along with them, but that only usually gets you so far but Google does have an opportunity where you can actually contact them either via chat, phone, or email, and you can actually, again, get more answers. I will say they actually just recently, like literally I believe in the past week or so, they just even also are introducing a new way to kind of verify accounts where you can even jump on a Zoom call, you can do a video tour and things like that as well. So I would absolutely do that. Yeah, because we actually, it's so funny you're bringing this up today, is we just had to have a talk about that because one of our clients we're going to have to do that to get them verified because there were some issues kind of previously. So again, some of the changes are it's business, Google Business Profile, but you can actually talk to them. You have to go into your account and you can kind of do contact and you can kind of open up a ticket, but they did just recently, release 2 new ways that we can verify that, most likely from the sounds of it, you might be like our other client that was just having issues that you definitely want to explore and even ask them about.
Great. Thank you. So helpful.
Yep. Any other questions? Perfect. Well, again, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I encourage you guys to check out our other workshops and webinars. Again, like I said, this is a 2.0 course. We have a 1.0. We have, again, the video, we have social media, we have all the other different types of digital marketing topics. And so if you love catching them live like this, I encourage you to sign up on skolmarketing.com/workshops and see our schedule. But also I encourage you guys to check out our YouTube channel where we record majority of these and put them on demand. So you can watch them anytime. That's why we record these, and you can be able to kind of watch them, whenever you want there. And so you can either go to our website and click on our little YouTube icon, or you can simply go to YouTube and just search for Skol Marketing, and you'll find our YouTube channel there. And so last thing I want to leave you guys with is, again, I appreciate you guys tuning in, check out our workshops, contact me with anything. If you guys have any questions, you guys run anything. And ultimately, one last thing that we do to kind of give back is we offer free consultations. These aren't sales pitches. If you want to talk to us about how Skol Marketing can help you from a service standpoint, absolutely, we'd love to talk to you about that. But we also know that, again, sometimes in classroom style, we just need sometimes a little bit extra help. So if you've got some of those specific questions, Kat, if you have some issues, with your Google, again, business profile, and we just want to talk a little bit more kind of offline one-on-one and how we can kind of help, if that's with SEO or analytics or social media, feel free to just reach out. Like I said, it's our way of giving back. We know that we love doing these workshops and we know these these help a lot of people. We just know that sometimes we need a little extra help as well. So I encourage you guys to take advantage of that. There's no obligation or anything like that, but here's our contact information. We'll also be following up with an email that has all of this in that, along with a copy of the presentation. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. You guys have a wonderful day, and Skol.